Nice and closed? Good boy. Oh, g'day, I didn't see you there. Keithy here, thanks for joining me again for another video. This time I've got Radar here helping out because he's very excited. We're packing the car for Cape York. Now if you haven't ever been to Cape York and you're wondering what you've got to pack, what you've got to take, things that you need to do before you leave, Radar and I are here to give you our help, so stick around and we'll show you what to do. Well, we couldn't go without checking this out.
Preparing tyres now. G'day Keithy here.
G'day, Keithy here.
G'day Keithy here.
So you've made the call. You're gonna go to Cape York. You're gonna plan. You're gonna do the trip. You're gonna do the telly track. You wanna see Weeper. You wanna do everything. Congratulations. You're gonna do it. But how do you get there? You've never been there before. You don't know anyone who lives up in Cape York. The place is just completely new to you and you don't know what you've got to do. You need to plan. So there's a way that I normally do things, and I've been there a long time now, so planning for me is a lot different to what it might be to you. But if this is going to be your first trip, then here's some tips to help you get started planning your Cape York trip. So I had a look at the Cape York trip in 4 ways. Any trip really. First thing you got to do is you got to plan the trip. You got to plan what you're going to do, where you're going to go, what you're going to see, things that you might need. Then you prepare for the trip. So that's packing the car, packing all your camping gear and all that kind of stuff. Then there's actually leaving for the trip. So that day has come, your car's full, you've got plenty of fuel, you've got the family, the dog, whoever you're going to take, and off you go, and you're halfway to Cape York, or all the way. And then last but not least is touching the sign. That big reason we go to Cape York, to see everything along the way. And of course, if you're going to Cape York, nobody goes there without touching and taking a photo at the Cape York sign. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take you through what I would do to get prepared and plan for a Cape York trip. So the first part of your Cape York trip is planning. What are you going to do? Where do you want to go, etc., etc. So I'm going to go through a couple of things that are really handy for planning your very first Cape York trip. Now the first one I've got is time. Time is very important, so before you even worry about starting to plan, you need to know how long you're going to be able to go up there for. So if you've only got a week, you're going to have a pretty rushed Cape York trip. But if you've got 4 weeks, 3 weeks, something like that is a perfect amount of time at Cape York, because you're away from home long enough to want to be back home at the end of the trip, having enjoyed what you've just seen. The next thing you're looking for is key attractions along the way. So a Cape York trip is not a Cape York trip without stopping in at souvenir stores and things like that on the way. But it's also about the towns that you see along the way. All of the Aboriginal communities and Weeper and Bamaga and everything like that. Apart from touching the sign, there's plenty of things to do that you can plan for your trip. So apart from seeing all of the attractions along the way, you're going to want to plan for some downtime as well, especially on the longer trips. You're going to need a couple of days here where you're going to do the washing and you're going to get on the internet when you have phone reception and pay some of your bills and all of that kind of stuff. Maybe you even want a rest day here and there. That way you can just catch up on you time and a call home. There's a lot of things that you can do. So adding in a rest day here and there, maybe even 1 day per week, just enough to refresh, do all of those important little chores and catch up on you time is important in the trip when you're planning. There's also that incidental kind of stuff, so medical stuff. For example, if you have someone in your convoy who's got a medical condition and they require medication, regular medication, then you need to make sure that they've got enough to get through the trip. Because you might find out if you need to get some incidental medication along your way, that some of these towns won't have any medication at all, let alone a pharmacy, for you to be able to pick up those things that you forgot to grab. So make sure you've got enough to cover you for the trip for medication. What about money? You're going to rely on that card, the credit card. Something that happens in the Cape York region frequently is that the power goes out or the internet drops out. And what does that mean? That means that you can't use your FPOS card when that's all buggered up. So how are you going to pay for your fuel or your accommodation, etc., when the power's out and you can't use your FPOS card? Time to think about taking just a little bit of cash with you. Now, I'm not recommending you take the whole bank. I normally take a couple of $100, just enough to fill the car up a couple of times if the FPOS machines start to play up and you're unable to use your card on the trip. Just enough to get you some food if you need it, and also a little bit extra fuel. And as the end of the planning stage, you're going to need to make a few bookings. Now, if you only got one car or even maybe two, sometimes you can get away and camp without making bookings. Just arrive and get yourself a little bit of accommodation, a camp spot somewhere. But if you've got a few people, or maybe half of your four-wheel drive club is coming along, you're going to want to make a booking, and you're going to want to make it well in advance for a Cape York trip, because I can tell you now, usually by January, for the start of the Cape York season, at the end of sort of April and start of March, May I should say, most of the bookings have already been made for that time. So you want to get it well in advance. If you can get 6 months in advance for your bookings, then that's the way to go. Not only that, it gives you the option of paying it earlier rather than having to take the cash or expect to swipe your card when you get there. And that's just going to be one less hassle for you on your trip. All right, so you've planned your trip, you've planned what you're going to do, you've made your bookings and whatnot. Time to pack. What are you going to do for packing? Well, you can break it down into a couple of steps. So you can get the things that people need. So that's personal items. That is medicines or... hello, Putter. Oh, you fell down. The packing stage is also a good time to think about weight too. On a big trip, especially when you're going away for 2 or 3 weeks, somewhere where you're not going to have everything at home, you want to take everything that you can take. Keep yourself supported, your phone's charged, your clothing, washing, all of that kind of stuff. But at the same time, you've got to fit it in here. Not only that, the more you have in here, the less space you've got and the more fuel you're going to end up using. And I guess given the price of fuel at the moment, you're not going to want to spend too much of that. So try as much as you can to pack light, to pack the essential things and a couple of little extra items, luxury item type stuff, so that you have a comfortable trip, but you don't overdo it. You don't overload the car, for example, and you don't have to get out every bit of your entourage every time you've got to set up your camp. All right, so when you're packing, the second thing I like to think of is the camping stuff. The stuff that you're going to sleep in, on, under, and around. Pretty simple. So you're going to sleep in a bed. Are you going to sleep in a cot mattress? Are you going to have one of those inflatable pump-up mattress type things? Whatever it is that you like to sleep on while you're camping, you're going to need to pack that. You're going to need to have that with you. Make sure that it's all in good condition and it's going to last for a setup and a pack up quite a lot. On an average Cape York trip, you're going to spend most days on the road with a couple of days here and there where you pull up. You're going to need your pillows, you're going to need bed sheets and doonas. I do say doona because it does get cold up there. Not extremely cold, not New South Wales cold. It gets Queensland cold, so that means it stays in the 20s. Sometimes you might hit the teens. So you're going to need something to keep you a little bit warm. Maybe a jumper will do the job for you every now and then. It doesn't get extremely cold, but it still gets cold enough. Then you're going to think about what you're going to sleep under. You're going to take a tent. Have you got a swag? Have you got one of those cot tents? Whatever it is, even if you're sleeping in the car for that matter, whatever it is, you need to make sure that it's in good condition, that it can be waterproof in case it does rain. And it doesn't rain all that frequently this time of year up at Cape York, but classic example, a couple of days ago, it was actually belting down up there in all of Queensland anyway, and obviously with all the stuff that's going on in New South Wales, I hope everyone's well down there. You want to make sure that if it does rain, you're covered. You're not going to get your camping gear wet because you're going to sleep in that bed every night and you don't want to go to bed in a wet bed. It's not a very pleasant thing to do. Then there's the car you've got to prepare for. So you know your car better than I know your car, or anyone for that matter. So it's up to you to prepare your vehicle for the Cape York trip. So if your car's prone to using lots and lots of oil, then you're going to need to take a little bit of extra oil with you. If you know that you've got a slow leak in one of your tyres, you probably shouldn't go on the trip. You should get that fixed. But it's a good idea to take a tyre repair kit. You don't need to take every tool you've got in your arsenal, but those tyre patches are a very handy thing to take. I've used them many times on Cape York trips. They're very handy, not just for me, for other people as well. Also incidental stuff like a fan belt. Maybe you need to take a little bit of coolant or a little bit of power steering fluid or something like that. You know your car mechanically better than anyone else, so it's your responsibility to make sure that you've got the parts that you need for your car on your Cape York trip. because you're going to do a lot of kilometres on a Cape York trip, so you want to make sure that it's going to be as reliable as possible as well. It's a good idea to give it a solid service, even if you need to send it to a mechanic before you go. That way you know you've got a very long distance before it's due for its next oil change, and it's due for a fan belt, and it's due for this and it's due for that. Just ways that you can save yourself some time, some effort. You don't need to take every bit of oil you've got at home. Just take some basic ones. You can buy stuff in Weipa and at Bamaga if you need to, but it's better not to have to do that in the first place if you've got what you need within reason. A good way that I look at it, normally as far as car stuff goes, I take one of those milk crates, and if I can't fit it in a milk crate, I don't take it. And that includes tools like my, what's that thing called? Spanner set, and my what are those other things? Screwdrivers. My screwdrivers as well. Now I've got a toolkit that lives in the car, so I've always got screwdrivers and things like that, but a bigger kit with spanners and sockets and stuff like that in it is very handy to take if you don't have a toolkit in your car. I normally keep all of my tools in here ready to go so that I know where they are. They're all organised, they're hidden away. All right, and in my opinion, the last thing you need to take is an emergency kit. So that doesn't only include a first aid kit. It might have a few emergency medications. So like I said before with the medication stuff, if you're taking something that you might not be able to get in a very remote town, it might be a good idea to get a couple of extra, take them with you, just in case, for example, you lose a couple of your special pills or whatever it may be. You know you've got a little bit of backup, and worst case scenario, you can call and get some flowing in, but you don't want to have to go ahead with that. Then there comes a fire extinguisher. Now, I cannot vouch for a fire extinguisher enough. If I can find and get a copy of that video from a Cape York trip that I went on in 2016, I'll show you the importance. Now, believe it or not, I've used a fire extinguisher on my Cape York trips more than I'd care to mention. Not on my stuff, but on other people's stuff, thankfully. But I'm very glad that I had them. Now, the first time, if I can show you the video, is actually at a service station on day one of a Cape York trip back in 2016. A contractor came into the service station, and believe it or not, his dual battery system actually caught fire in this work ute. Luckily, he didn't put the fuel bowser in. He actually just drove his car out of the way to where we were waiting together to start the Cape York trip. And I had my fire extinguisher at the ready and managed to run up and luckily put that fire out, because it could have been pretty nasty. He might have actually lost his vehicle if he didn't have, or if I didn't have that fire extinguisher. And luckily I was quicker to get out there than the staff at the service station with the service station fire extinguishers. So you never know when you're going to need it, but I'm telling you now, I think it's a very, very good thing to take, is a fire extinguisher on a Cape York trip. If you can think of any other emergency stuff that you should take on a Cape York trip for yourself, then definitely make sure you pack it. But again, keep light, because you've only got this much space to pack and you want to keep your weight down so that you're not using so much fuel, especially at the cost of fuel now. You also want to keep your space down, because if you've got loose stuff in your car, that's going to go flying around if you hit these corrugations and bumps or have to jam on the brakes. You don't want to hurt anyone else in your car. So you don't want to overpack. You want to keep it light, simple, to the point, with a few little luxury items, just enough to get you through a trip comfortably and get you home. So before you go, and well before you go, are two good times to check your car over for everything mechanical that you think might happen while you're gone. So the first check I normally do is about 2 weeks before I leave for a trip. The reason that I do that is because sometimes things develop and you need to get things repaired. So for example, I work on this car, I do everything on this car, but you might not be the old home mechanic that I am. You might need to actually book in and get your car taken into a mechanic or somewhere to perform those repairs. Or if your tyres are worn down and you need to get new tyres or brakes or anything like that, it's going to take some time. You can't just check that out the day before your trip and go, oops, I need to fix all of that kind of stuff. So if you've got any repairs or anything that needs to be done, it's a good idea to do a couple of weeks before you leave, check, and then the night or the day before, even 2 days before your trip, check everything else in your car. So if you know that there's something normal that you need to do, for example, if your car uses a bit of oil or coolant or power steering fluid or brake fluid or anything like that, then there's a chance for you to make sure that everything is in tip-top shape before you go on a trip like this. Because for two reasons: one, it's hard to get stuff, especially for a car that's not very common. If it's not a Toyota Land Cruiser or Hilux, it's hard to get up there. And the other reason is you know your car better than anyone else, and you can pack for what it might need. So if you need to take that milk crate full of engine oil and spark plugs and fan belts and whatever else, then you know what you're going to need, and it gives you plenty of time to prepare, to plan, and to fix something big. Two of the big things that I recommend before any trip is new tyres on your vehicle, unless they are close to new, within sort of a year old and got plenty of tread left on them, and your brakes. There's two things a lot of people run into trouble with on Cape York trips and need help with, because the car hasn't stopped when they're going down a hill, for example, or if they blow their tyres because they're just that old and crusty. So good tyres, very important on a Cape York trip. All right, so you've been through your list of preparation, you've packed the car, you've checked the oil, turn the key, off you go. You're getting up north, maybe even halfway through the dirt track, and you forget something. Don't fear, because there are places along the way that you can buy things, including food, fuel, definitely, and basic supplies. So the basic things, if you've forgotten something, don't fear that you've done something wrong. You can always catch up on that. If it's extremely important stuff, you can also get it flowing into Weeper and at the tip if needs be. Not only that, there's always plenty of people coming up, so you could jump on the forums, find out information on people who are travelling up, and if you need something in emergency, you might be able to ask them if they can bring something. If you don't need it straight away, maybe you can wait a couple of days or a week, then that's a good idea there to save you a few bucks. If someone else, maybe you can throw them a beer if they take something up for you that you need that's not urgent. It's also a good idea to talk to other people on the trip. You get road information from other people driving past, so they're handy to talk to. Also, don't forget to abide by the signs that you see along the way for the road conditions, speed limits, everything like that. It also makes your trip and other people's trips a happy one if you're a little bit respectful. So if you're camping and you're making a bit of noise, maybe try and keep it down as it gets a little bit later in the night, just so you don't interfere with other people's sleep, because sleep is a very important thing on a big trip like Cape York. It's also a bit respectful to mind your language, especially if there's kids around. Now, some kids are used to hearing P's and Q's, but just mind the swearing if you can, because you never know what someone else's kids are learning from your voice. Another important thing on the Cape York roads is just to drop your speed. I know I've said it in every other video that I've done for Cape York. Drop your speed. If you've got oncoming vehicles on those dirt roads, you're going to be throwing rocks and dirt and all kinds of dust up. So if someone's coming towards you, make sure you just slow down, drop the dust a little bit, make it easier for them to see where they're going after they've passed you, and they might do the same back to you. The last thing I want to talk about is dust. Not only are you going to get it on the roads when you're driving around, but you're going to get it in your vehicle. You're going to get it in your camper. You're going to get it in everything. Now, this thing seals up really well. On a really bad road, you won't get anything in there. It'll be that one time that you open the door, just as you've pulled up and there's a plume of dust coming from behind your vehicle, or you've just opened your window and somebody comes tearing past you. That's the time that you get all the dust in the car, if you don't have to have your windows down all the time. So keep your windows up, keep your doors closed, make sure your seals are clean. Steering wheel, I usually clean my steering wheel down and my gear lever before I go every morning. I have a morning routine check that gets me through all of that, but just be prepared. You're going to get dust in your vehicle. You're going to get it on your feet. You're going to get mud, dirt, all kinds of things. So it's not going to be the cleanest trip you've ever been on, but it'll be the greatest. And the last thing on any Cape York trip, touching the sign. It's a signal that you've made it to Cape York. When you're up there, you see that northernmost point of Australia sign, go up there and get your photo with your mates, with your family. That's a sign that you've made it to one of the roughest places in Australia. Congratulations. So I hope I've helped someone out. I've been there a million times, and I'd like to see everyone in Australia get the opportunity to go up and see Cape York in the safest and best way that they can. So if you're just planning your trip now, congratulations, you're going to have a ball. If you've just come back, you probably want to go back there again. I know I do. Have a good time packing, getting everything right. The first time you might forget a few things. You might learn what you needed that you bought and what you bought that you didn't need, and a lot of things like that. But that's just a learning part of camping and long-term camping. It's very much different to just a normal weekend camp. Obviously, you're in a remote place as well. You don't have phone reception for most of the time that you're up in Cape York. If you're with Optus, you probably won't have it at all. Once you go past Cooktown, that's about it. Enjoy your trip. I hope I've helped somebody. Thanks very much, and we'll see you next time. Don't forget to do the subscribe thing down there. Really helps me out. I appreciate your time, guys, and we'll see you next time. Enjoy your trip.